be considered for developing the AI technologies. This is a very wrong case. That means that this is not well justified. So that belongs to the autonomy of ethical consideration. So what are the beneficents? Beneficents means mostly looked after the patient best interest. That means in which way patients can be helped or patient can be easy to access, or the patient can think about the from safety perspective. All these things relies on the beneficence. That means the patient can think about of the from safety perspective. These are the all these things belongs to the diagnostic perspective. That means the patient can think about of the from safety perspective. These are the all these things belongs to the diagnostic perspective. That means the patient can think about of the from safety perspective. These are the all these things belongs to the diagnostic perspective. That means the patient can think about of the from safety perspective. Normally, all these things West Bengal to outside the West Bengal, and based on this information or based on this model, it is not necessary West Bengal that the outside the West Bengal or the digits will be taken. And based on this information, or the demographic corrections must be very crucial when we are designing AI system. Avoiding bias in algorithms. Bias mostly occur in the training algorithms. So everybody heard the term the class imbalance problem. That means when you train a particular model, that and some kinds of data are belongs to a particular class and less number of data belongs to a small number of class. So when we train any kind of machine learning model with the utilization of that kind of data, that time may be possibility that the model produce the biased results. So this is known as the class imbalance problem. Next is fairness in AI outcomes. So fairness in that needs to be considered to restrict the biasness within the algorithms as well as in the data. So that can be performed based on various techniques and mostly it relies on statistical method, or sometimes we can include from the perspective of machine learning algorithms some regularization perspective to fit the overfitting data and underfitting data. So, and some fairness constraints need to be mentioned for the proper outcomes of AI devices. That you can see the different types of examples: developing AI diagnostic tools that work accurately across different demographic groups, using AI to ensure fair distribution of healthcare resources such as ICU bed or vaccines or during crisis. So this is the more prominent thing that the sometimes it has been observed that ICU bed is available, but it is not provided to the persons who are financially very weak. But the persons who is a very rich persons, he called the hospital and I have recovered from ICU bed. That time it provides the allocate to the ICU bed to the corresponding person. But we need to design a AI device in order to that time there will be different types such information and that time predict accurate information that the ICU bed is available or not. It not provide that based on some richer persons are saying or rich persons the income is very high, that time AI device says the ICU bed is available, and when we take the instance based on corresponding attribute some financial income is very less, and that time not able predict that the ICU bed is not available. That cannot be happen within a model. And next most important and core part of the AI implementation in healthcare is the bias and fairness in AI algorithms. So bias mostly arises due to various factors such as biased data, and bias which mostly occur in two cases. One is the data and another is the algorithm design. In case of fairness, fairness requires the conscious effort to ensure that the algorithm does not discriminate against any group or individual. That means we try to develop or design an algorithm or a model that cannot bias, that cannot be discriminated based on the feature vectors. So if we want to focus on fairness of an algorithm, that time we need to mostly focus on the bias of the data as well as the bias of the models. So going to the point, so what are the different sources of bias? So the data collection bias, that means the data collection bias, the when inherent bias in the training data is to be developed algorithms. That means everybody know when we develop the AI models, that time we need to data, and if data contains some bias, Yes, that means to a particular class, whatever the model is to be trained, so the trained model must be biased. Next is algorithmic bias. This bias is introduced by the design and structure of the AI algorithm itself. So what does it mean? So if a model is developed for skin cancer disease prediction, so when we develop this model, we trained the model to the cancer data sets. That means the cancer medical data that may be in the image format, or that may be in the records format or the tabular format also. So if we think about that, this is the image data, whatever the model is developed. So this model may or may not be suitable for the speech data also, because inherent characteristics in the speech information is far different from the image data. So, so that time we do not bias that whatever the parameters and whatever the, for example, in deep learning CNN model we are considering in the skin cancer disease predictions. So it may be considered as CNN model, exact CNN model, whatever we used in the skin cancer for the speech-based digit recognition, so that time it not be work very well. So we are mostly, if we use, then we are algorithmically biased. So that time we need to think about the basic characteristics of the data, and based on the characteristics of data, we need to consider the what are the appropriate algorithms for a particular data set or the particular type of diseases. And next is the human bias. Is this same with the data collection bias? Is this any difference? Yes, the question, the answer is yes. Some. So if we think about the sleep apnea disease prediction, sleep disorder predictions, and when we collect the data from the perspective of sleep disorder predictions, that time we need to consider some frequency of occurrence of data record. That means if we think about in night from 1 a.m. to 1:30 a.m. and next 2 a.m. to 2:30 a.m., within this the 30 minutes gap. But sometimes some medical practitioners or the those who are collecting the data, they maybe missed out the some 1 second or 2 seconds. But within the signal collection, 1 minute and 2 minutes is very vital or very crucial to predict the sleep disorder. So human bias is very much crucial point to generate the bias of any model. Next is the impact of the bias in healthcare AI. What are the impact? That means the if it contains the bias, then the discriminations will be happen. Unfair decision making can be observed. The some trust and reputation should be vanished, and amplification of social biases. So discriminations means if the data contains some mm, biased data. For example, I think everybody heard this news at the time of 2001, at the beginning of the AI development, the AI beginning of the not like that. So approximate 2000 or 2001, that time Google face recognition was there, and some South African lady checked her face to predict that the face is human being or not, and so that time this software provides that this girl is the gorilla. That means the based on her face, system recognize she is a gorilla. So based on this information, some uh, some justice or some cases already happened against to the Google during that time. So the basic thing is that, and Google accept the thing that they are not, whatever the model they have been developed, this model was not trained the data on the South Africa peoples. They are considering on the data in another domains or demographic region where the lady who tested or not belongs to the particular demographic region. So if we think about that, this is the demonstrative discrimination of the thing. So unfair decision making means biased AI system can result in inequitable decisions in key areas of life such as criminal justice or healthcare. So, for example, uh, if the data contain the biased data and try to predict the progress of the cancer for a particular person, that time it is very harmful because if it is biased and the model saying that the cancer is progressing, then this, but actually the cancer is not progressive. So whatever the treatment will be considered, this will be the wrong treatment. So this is totally unfair decision and greatly impact to the patients in terms of harmness. And next is the trust and reputation. So if the system contains the bias, then the obviously trust will be vanished. And we are not able to consider that kind of AI technology to a particular investigations or clinical perspective or any kind of drug design perspective. And next is the amplification of social biases. If AI systems are not carefully developed and managed, they can unwittingly reinforce the existing social biases in the data on which they are taught. That means if we are not considering various various social economical data, that means the poor people, high risk people, and so on, then whatever the model to be developed, that cannot be uniformly applicable to the healthcare perspective. So these are the case studies, that means the where we can see the bias things are appropriate. If we want to recognize the face, there are three types of faces are there. So if we are avoid that kind of face during the development of model, and next when we are testing the model and we are incorporate that kind of face, so there is the high chance for providing the wrong answer. So this is the data contains the biasness. So when you are developing model, you think about that. Predictive analysis in healthcare, and AI system predicts higher health risks of for minority groups without sufficient data justification. And this is the, I'm not talking about detail, but thing is that if we escape the so many minority peoples or persons, we are not considering to train our model, that time the whatever the model will be generate or develop, this is totally harmful to the human being. Diagnostic tools, an example of diagnostic tools may be less accurate for unrepresentative population. Oh, sorry, each there, this each will not be there. It is mistake from mistake. Unrepresented populations means the persons are not presented in the training data, or the type of persons or the related to the persons are not presented within the training data, but this person is considered within the testing data. For example, suppose if we want to record the speech based disease prediction, the person is suffering from a stress or no, based on speech. So we are taking the lot of persons residing in our campus, that means in the NIT Durgapur campus, and recorded all the speech and try to predict the person is suffering for the stress or not. And most of the people are saying in the English, the speech in the English. But if we collect the data from Bankura, Birbhum, or another persons which is remote area, so people are not able to speak in English. So that time the diagnostic tool, the tools, whatever the speech-based model, whatever we design, that will be not appropriate for that persons also. So need to be developed systems that can be equally applicable to all kinds of peoples. So that time you need to consider the algorithmic design to avoid the bias. That means whatever the language are considering for speaking, that needs to be converted. So some converter will be incorporated. That means text to speech converter will be considered for developing the healthcare based AI system. So all these things need to be considered for this. So what about addressing the bias in AI algorithms? What the things to be considered? Diverse representative of data. So we need to collect or use the data for training a particular model which are collected from every segments or from every zones, or that means the every groups of peoples. Bias detection and auditing. So we must be care about the biasness in a particular data set. So to identify or detect, there are various statistical and machine learning techniques need to be considered to detect biasness in a particular data set. And and so next is algorithmic bias. So before implementing any kind of algorithms, we need to employ different kinds of techniques, techniques that can be incorporated in the training data. Fairness constant in the model training. That means we need to incorporate the some constant to a model that within this limitation or restrictions result will not be delayed. That means if anybody developed a AI model and that can be utilized for image classification, biomedical image classification data, and the researcher getting the 80% accuracy. Can we say this model will be the more appropriate or beneficial to the market or to the particular disease? That time we cannot say. So that time you need to fix out the particular 90% or 95% results if the model achieve. That time we may consider this model is okay. And to achieve the proper performance or the high accuracy, there are lots of techniques are there, and that time you need to consider which is more beneficial to a particular disease. So all the regularization technique is very much widely used for uh, balancing between the overfitting and underfitting, L1 regularization. But every time regularization cannot be suitable for all kinds of health health related problems. It may be considered the another type of things, the data augmentation technologies or dropout technologies for balancing the overfitting and underfitting. Next is the transparent reporting. Provide clear and transparent documentation about data, model development process, and known limitations. That penalty, that means that about documentations means when we collect the data, that times we must be specify the as much as possible information, age, sex, the socioeconomic status, and he is coming from the rural or urban, what are the financial assistance, etc., etc. Everything will be recorded when we collecting the data, as well as the patient must be informed by that this data can be utilized for training of a particular AI model development. Next is the continuous monitoring and updating process. Bias and fairness are not the static, they require ongoing monitoring and updates. Every time you need to monitor the system. Next is the data bias in AI systems. So, what are the different types of data bias? Already we have seen the data bias can be exist in the data collection, algorithmic bias, and human bias. Then, what are the different types of data collection bias exist in the data? Selection bias, measurement bias, exclusion bias. Selection bias means the occurs when data are collected does not represent the population intended to be analyzed. That means we would like to predict what are the different types of regions. Different types of peoples are residing in our Durgapur zone. Okay, so that time you need to consider different types of means. If we so simply, if we think about the what are the that means the community, that means Hindu, Muslim, Buddha, Christian, Parsi, etc. So that time you need to consider from every people. That means from every location of the persons, and next based on their characteristics behavior we need to predict the person where to belong. Next is the measurement bias. Measurement bias arise from errors or inconsistencies in the data collection method. That means the whatever we discussed in earlier cases, if we record the ECG signal for predicting the epilepsy or to predicting the sleep disorder, that time some duration of the gap will be there. If we mismatch the duration of the gap, then we are not able to retrieve the full information for sleep disorder diagnosis or analysis. Exclusion bias, when the certain groups are underrepresented or excluded from the data set. Everybody, we are saying and we are observing that in our newspaper, uh, if we if the our kids study from either Akash or Allen or the Pathfinder, the Akash is providing, we are the most stakeholder, that we are the very influence, we are providing good teaching to the students so that students are able to catch the doctors, or they are able to crack the NEET examination. And based, the thing is that how many peoples they are open up. That means how many students they are showing that these are the students in the good showing scored the good rank in the NEET. They are not considering how many number of students are considered or studied throughout the 2 years for preparation of the NET examination. They are not focusing that kind of information. They are excluding this information. They are considering mainly on the students those who are cracked the examinations or those who are good students. They are not considering the another students, but lot of students or huge number of students are taken admissions for their NEET examinations through either it may be Akash or Elin or etc. So if exclusion of bias means that when we predict some tendency trading, that means how many students are able to crack the NET if he or she study from the Akash, then that time loss of information is there. We are not considering all the students, those who are admitted from class beginning of the classes for 2 years journey. So this is the exclusion bias. So example, these are the most examples of the selection bias where we can consider or where it can be found the selection bias, mostly variable devices, or if we take in the some math process things and different types of things. Measurement bias mostly occur in signal based things. And that means the cardiovascular disease prediction, heart rate disease predictions, or any neurological disorder predictions. That time mostly we can use the signals, and that may contains the most measurement bias, and sometimes it is called the some noise, etc. And exclusion of this, so when we try to determine any community or the percentage of peoples are getting job or not, that kind of things mostly belongs to the exclusion of bias. So how to mitigate that kind of things? That means how to mitigate that kind of bias within the data. So inclusive data collections will be required. That means you need to consider all kinds of data, all types of data, all the persons. That means irrespective of age, sex, gender, and so on. And most crucial for the data pre-processing technique. So mostly when you are using the deep learning algorithm, that time little bit we are not, mostly we are not using any kind of data pre-processing techniques. But to feed the data to the deep learning model, we need to customize or tailor some input data. So that time we need to take care of that. We are not utilizing any kind of technique which are mislead or misconduct or the enhance the loss of information. So we should take care of the data pre-processing thing as well as the bias audit and testing. So during, based on the different techniques for identification of the biasness, that means the class imbalance problem, that time we may consider the underflow or overflow to balance the imbalance property. Other than this underflow, overflow, there are so many techniques are there, so that can be utilized to mitigate the bias. And collaborative efforts. So the most importantly, collaborative effort means that the technologists, healthcare providers, and clinical practitioners must be cooperatively or jointly implement the AI models for healthcare. If any persons, they are able very much efficient for developing any AI models, and some persons are very much efficient for collection of data, and doctors are very much able to identify that particular patient is suffering a disease or not. If we are not combinedly considering both of three, then there must be some gap to prediction of any diseases. So when we are considering any kind of applications in terms of healthcare and try to develop any artificial intelligence model, the we can advise or we can consider some doctors or clinical practitioners that hey, he or she help us, we are going to the right direction or not. If we are not providing the right direction, they are providing some input in which way the we need to develop the model. Next, most important, model bias. Whatever we discussed, this is associated within the bias, within the data set. That means the perspective from the data collection. Here we can think about the from the perspective of AI model development. So model development means the algorithmic bias, parameter bias, and interaction bias. Mostly algorithmic bias means bias introduced by the design of the machine learning algorithms. The particular technique decision tree is suitable for a particular algorithm. So whatever the problem is solved by decision algorithm, and this problem may or may not be suitable for the neural network also. Okay. So the everybody know the no free lunch theorem. There is no single algorithm which can be outperformed for all kinds of problems. So the algorithm base is very crucial thing or the critical point. So to mitigate this, that time we can think about the algorithm selection problem. There are huge mathematical derivations are there or perspectives are there. Based on that, we can consider which algorithm will be appropriate for our problem. Next is the parameter bias. The bias resulting from how the parameters of the model are tuned and optimized. Everybody know the parameters and hyperparameters of a model. Can you expect this? That everybody know that the huge difference between the hyperparameter and parameters of deep learning models. So the selection of parameters as well as the hyperparameters is very crucial or the critical thing. Obviously difficult or challenging tasks. They are inversely proportional to each other. If you think of the parameter and hyperparameter, so that time there are so many. Mostly the selection of parameters and hyperparameters are known as the NP complete problem. I think everybody knows the NP complete. Next is the interaction bias. Bias emerging from the interaction between model and its user or the environment. Model and environment means what you want to say. That means whatever the model we develop, uh, this model is not suitable for the cold area, or this model is not suitable for the dry area. That means if we think about the image sensory based robot system to predict the some diseases in a particular region. That means the pandemic prediction based on some drone images. So if it is the we are trained the model or develop the model in a clear way that there is no any fog or any pollution within the sky. But if we tested this model or validate this model, where there are so many industries are there and so many high chance of appearing the fog is there, that time model degrade the performance. So this is the interaction bias. So that time there are different types of techniques need to be taken care of to avoid that kind of things. So already impact of the model bias. So unequal treatment can be observed. That means the equality treatment cannot be spread to over the peoples. Inaccurate prediction should be there. That means the false positive rate and false negative rate will be increased. False positive means actually negative and false negative means the actual positive. So there is the that may harm to the patients. Here the disparities will be coming and additions of the task to be removed from the devices if the model contains any bias. So these are the some techniques need to be considered for mitigating the model bias. So everybody know that we are not going to the so much technical in depth. So the just fairness constant, some boundary limitation to be considered within the algorithm design, where the if the algorithm accuracy is, we are giving that kind of things, the performance will not be good. That means we restrict that model must attain that kind of performance. Otherwise, the model will not be fitted for that given data. Regularization techniques, that there are several regularization techniques are there need to be considered for mitigating the bias within the data as well as the algorithm also. Adversarial diversing. Adversarial training, everybody hear about the term generative AI. Mostly in generative AI, one tradition or the growing models is the generative adversarial network CAN models is out there, and mostly this is utilized for most of the drug design perspective. So if the model is not designed suitably, so whatever the drug to be designed based on this model, that is that will be very harmful. That means lead identifications. What are the molecules need to be considered for drug design? Diverse data set to be considered on training. So that's why in case of healthcare system, when we are utilizing the data, we need a huge amount of data set. That means the data set contains more number of instances. Otherwise, it is very difficult. And you may say, or you may say that from the less number of data sets and considering the augmentation technique, and based on the data augmentations, we are increasing the number of instances, and we can develop AI model for the healthcare. But at that time, the thing will become that the augmented data means that from the existing data we are generating the new data. So there may be the high chance that the variety of the features will be less. It has been observed in our lab for skin cancer disease predictions. We are utilizing the active learning to identify that which augmented data is not significant from the given data. That means if we have the 100 samples and try to generate the 200 samples, so 100 samples will be augmented. Then among the 100 samples, then which samples are not so significant or appropriate for training of a deep learning model based on the given instances. That means 100 given instances data. Next point is the transparency and accountability in AI system. We can say this is the high priority things need to be considered when we develop the AI model for the healthcare system. The transparency means the practice of making AI system and their decision making process understandable and accessible to the stakeholders. That means it may be the patients, it may be the healthcare providers or clinicians. Importance, what the importance of for transparency? The bill starts. If this is very much transparent, then we can trust the model. Allows security or privacy of the data, enables informed decision making by the patients and healthcare providers. Accountability means the technologists and healthcare professionals responsible for the outcome and impacts of AI systems. Then what will be the outcomes, and is this outcomes is right or wrong or appropriate or not, or the system is well performed or not, that can be accounted. That means that needs to be considered accountability. So mostly this belongs to the ethical issues of this. So key aspects of transparency, if we think about the model's transparency, if we are giving the some medical image data and predicting the he or she suffering some disease or not, cancer, skin cancer or not, but question will come how the model predict we are suffering from the skin cancer or not. So explainability need to be considered to understand and interpret the model how it works. So next is communication and stakeholders. Communication with stakeholders means the based on the image, if we design a device, so suppose the smartphone based device, and we try to capture the physiological signals, if it is not properly communicate the devices with the skins of a particular person to capture the physiological information. That time system produce the wrong answer. For example, if we retrieve the temperature of our body, but we wear some jacket, and in the jacket there are so many layers are there, and we wear these wearable devices over the jacket. So whatever the informations need to be considered, and based on analysis of this information, this may be high chance for wrong answer or wrong prediction. So the communication with the stakeholders must be good. So documentations and reporting. Documentations means in which way comprehensive documentation of AI development process. That means what types of data we are considering, what are the different types of classes are there, what are the time durations are considered for data collections, and so on. Everything will be there. Then after that, in which techniques are considering for implementing the data, that means in which pre-processing technique we have been considering, and which kinds of model we are considering for the predictions that need to be documented. Everything will be documented, and obviously data sources will be there. So next is ensuring accountability. Accountability means the model is performed well or not, or whatever the model is developed based on the data, this data is appropriately maintaining all the privacy or security or not, or the data collection based on the patient consent or not. Everything will be considered accountability, and that times governance they must need to be considered. So establishing clear guidelines and oversight mechanisms for the development and deployment of AI. This is the most important thing. So guidelines must be there, that if the age of a particular patient or the kids, every time you are not capturing or collecting the all kinds of data. If the kids are very small, at 1 year or 2 year, that time you are not utilizing any ultrasonography or radiological devices to capture the data. That time consider any pathological devices by, that means the based on the blood test and so on. Next is the regulatory compliance. Regulatory compliance means the some various kinds of rules and regulations need to be considered for implementing the artificial intelligence for healthcare system. This is the general data protection rules, and the HIPAA is the another thing which is generated we discussed here. So I think this is already discussed in last classes, but that is the yesterday classes. I will go into the explainable AI means we need to it refers to the AI system that provide the clear, understandable explanations of their functioning and decision making process to the human users. So persons need to know how it is work and why it is work for a particular task. So that must be contained the different perspective, trust and adaptation, accountability, regulatory compliance, and improve outcomes. So that kind of things must be considered or must be mm, uh, incorporated when we thinking about the explainable AI. So mostly there are some techniques, there are lots of techniques are there, mostly model agnostic methods are there, model specific methods are there, visualization techniques are there. Everybody know that the model agnostic technique, that means the that kind of things, that this model specific methods means that any kind of machine learning algorithms, and it is applicable, it is structure based things. So it is the structure dependent. So any kind of model agonistic, in that case, if you think about the model agonistic model, it is irrespective of the structure of the model. Any kind of machine learning algorithm need to be considered and need to be trained on a particular data, And next we try to determine the relationship or interpretation among the target and outcomes of a model. Mostly it belongs to the model agonistic model. And model specific means that different types of machine learning or deep learning algorithms, what is the nature of what is the structure of the model from the structure's perspective. So analyzing the structure perspective, we may consider the model specific method. For example, if we consider mostly deep learning, that means most of the research of biomedical image classification is just the convolutional neural network, and they are utilizing so many layers, convolution layers, fully connected. The question will come: why we consider this number of or fixed number of convolutional layers or pooling layers as well as the fully connection layer, as well as in the filter size, number of filters, pooling type, number of nodes within the fully connected layer, all are very vague to consideration to a particular problem. So that time we need to just a minute. শ্রেণীদা একটা লেকচার চলছে, আসছে এখন একটু পরে। না আমি আসছি, একটা লেকচারটা হয়ে যাক, আমি আসছি। আমি কালকে থাকবো না। না হ্যাঁ I am very sorry. So visualization technique, there are mostly two type visualization technique. These are the techniques I think already discussed in last yesterday. Feature importance plot and partial dependence plot. Feature importance plot means that it mostly focus what features its variable is most appropriate for the what features is most appropriate, and in shows how these features is important for a particular output. This is the partial dependency plot. Next, challenges and considerations of what are the challenges or considerations need to be considered, and balance explainable AI, balance complexity and explainability, user friendliness, accuracy, all these things. We can accountability in use. Already we discussed trust, safety, and ethically. We are going to the another key components of. We are going to challenges of complexity, data privacy. Already we discussed just two years. Okay, so these are the most important thing: regulatory frameworks and guidelines. When you develop any kind of AI models for the healthcare systems, with that time we need to consider some rules and regulations, and whatever the guidelines already provided for that kind of things. That means for implementation of AI. So the first thing is the compliance, ethical standards, trust, and confidence. We must, in case of compliance, ensure AI system comply with the legal requirements protecting patients' rights and safety. In case of compliance, we need to consider this. Ethical considerations means the promotes to ethical use of AI, preventing or misusing of and addressing the bias. So misusing of this data means misusing and addressing bias means if any person or any data collection center collect the data and they supply this data to the anywhere, the persons utilize this data and use for the bad cases or the not for well-being. So that will be harmful. So that time we need to consider the misuse of or prevent the misuse of data. Trust and confidence builds public trust and confidence in AI technology by demonstrating commitment to safety and ethics. So this is the thing. So what are the different key regulatory bodies exist right currently in the world? Everybody knows the International World Health Organizations provide global guidelines on ethical use of the AI in healthcare. This is for who releases ethics governance. just few months ago, they published the guidelines how to use and what kinds of things need to be considered when we develop the AI models. International Medical Device Regulatory Forum established a harmonizing guidelines for AI and medical device. When we think implement AI models and that can be incorporated to the medical devices, then what needs to be considered? That means what are the guidelines to be followed that is mentioned within this things. European Union, they are producing general data protection regulations, protect data privacy and regulates data processing. That means it might be observed that we are not able to access all kinds of data. Whatever they are providing some links in their portal, but we are not able to access this. So for accessing that kind of data, we need to take permission from the concerned authority. If they are believe that they are able to provide the data, then they allow. Otherwise, they are not providing the data. In just few weeks ago, I am trying to access some data where medical the image data and signal data is there to determining the stress for a particular student, and this is deposited in the US some MIT space data. They are not providing the access to collect the data. They are asking the different terms and conditions which is to be considered or taken to be permission from our ministry also. So based on the general data protection regulations, we are not able to access all kinds of data. So the data privacy is protected. European Medical Agency guidelines provides framework for evaluating and approving AI-based medical technology. So these are the well-known agency or guidelines providing how to use the AI techniques in case of healthcare study. And next, United States Food and Drug Administration are there. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, standards and protection for sensitive patient data through secure handling protected health information. That means the patients are suffering some diseases, and from these patients we are taking the data and implement a model, and this model will be applicable to the another persons. That cannot be acceptable because the protected health information rules are there. If the patients are suffering a particular disease and this is not disclosed to the anybody, then that kind of data need not be considered for our AI implementations. So in Asia, mostly we are considering China. There is some health line, health related restrictions or strategies are maintained through this website. Japan is also there, and we can find the different global policies throughout this blog. The AI regulations around the world, a comprehensive overview of the global policies, we can find from this blog also. And to go. So if whatever we are considering or thinking about in the global perspective, that means in the outside the India. But what in our India thinks about the deployment of AI technology in healthcare as well as then in the different sectors, that means the agriculture, finance, etc. So AI regulations that within this blog post that we published in the 26th January 2024, AI regulations in India, current state and future perspective. This is the well-known blog post where they are providing some informations that what are the different things are India are considering and needs to be followed, and what are the existing standards and regulations are there in the world and so on. Mostly in 2018, India introduced an inclusive approach to artificial intelligence apparel for first national strategy for utilization of AI. Mostly this is known as the Niti Aayog committee developed some draft for how to use or deployment of AI in different areas. National Data for the Governance framework, all are in the draft situation. MIT released a draft NDGP, National Data Governance Framework Policy. All these are in the draft situation. So initial standard that must be followed. Whatever the rules and regulations are making by the Indian policymakers, that must be satisfied the ISO standard. So that is mentioned in the Indian standard, and if you are able to learn more, then you can go through this link. And most importantly, in last December 2023, India signed a global partnership on artificial language intelligence with the various countries, mostly Singapore, Japan, China, Korea, Canada, US, England, UK, and the different countries. With an objective, the policy will be one, that means utilization of AI in healthcare or different perspective throughout the world. That means the same policy must be considered throughout the world, and how to enhance the utility of the AI technology in various fields. This is the perspective of global partnership. So these are the regulatory compliance. Regulatory compliance, that means the how to rapid technological advancement to global variability and balancing the innovation and regulations. Rapid technological advancement means that, as we know, that the rapidly the technology is growing day by day. So is it possible that is it true that all kinds of developed technology can be applicable to the healthcare or not? That needs to be comply with the verifying with the different standards or the protocol strategy, or need to check the ethical issues for the different medical devices. So these are the case study. We are considering the AI in radiology. So for the X-ray images, that these are the backgrounds problem we are considering. Implementation different AI models can be considered to investigate pneumonia or COVID or no, etc. Some accuracy we are considering, and when we implement this, that time we need to consider that AI system must train on the appropriate data set. That means the we are considering the data set from well organizations or the from well known hospital, those who are providing the appropriate information of the particular data set. And personalized medicines is the one another case study where are different types of, so need to be considered the medicines. So whatever the models need to be developed, that must be taken care of for every time the monitoring will be considered. Otherwise, if it is the dose is mismatch for a particular patient, there is the high risk of the death. So these are the future directions in AI implementation in healthcare. Here we are considering from different perspective, not only on from the ethical perspective. These applications in the from the advancement in the AI technologies, integration of AI with other technologies, and personalized and medicine, precision medicine perspective. Deep learning, day by day, the different types of models are developing to know, to clear, understand, or to mm, know more why they are working very well. That techniques need to be considered. That means the mostly occur in the explainable AI, and we need to consider the natural language processing or integration of this, because the text is very much crucial. Most of the people are not able to express their disease or problem, but maybe sometimes they are able to, based on written statement, they can express. Some confidential diseases are there, they are not exposed, but they are able to write down all these things, information. So this information to be considered to appropriate input in order to predict this, predict the disease. So NLP is very much crucial, as well as the reinforcement learning or personalized treatment. That means that whatever the medicines we are taking, after 1 year after consumption of this medicine, next year if this medicine will be suitable or not, that time we need to be considered. So different another type of things, internet of medical things, uh, blockchain technology, that means for privacy perspective, and 5G or edge computing for faster processing of the telemedicines or tele doctor service will be required. And as well as personalized and precision medicines means that we need to be research on the genomic analysis for healthcare data. That means to predict the drug for a particular disease, we need to consider some genomic information and so on. So these are the things need to be considered in the future directions of the healthcare. So thank you. I am going to first the last portions. Mostly I am covered the overview of this. I am not detailing to the technical things. Technical things means the most particular technique we are considering for mitigating the bias. We are not considering. There are different types of techniques out there. So this is the end of my lecture. Then if you have any question, then I will be happy to answer. Hello? Hello?
Sir,
Yes?
volume. Ritika,
Yes,
Chirag,
sir.
you
Yes, sir.
there?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, please.
So now I would like to call Ida ma'am for the vote of thanks.
Okay, am I audible? Hello, am I
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
audible?
ma'am.
You
Yes,
are. You
Yes,
are.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so a very good afternoon to all of you present over here. On behalf of Department of Computer Science and Engineering and Department of AIML and CST, JIS College of Engineering, I am glad to express vote of thanks for the second day of our one-day FDP program on Explainable AI in Healthcare. A special thanks to our today's speaker, Mr. Nondadulal Jana, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science and Engineering from NIT Durgapur, for his valuable space on ethical considerations in AI implementation in healthcare. I hope that your speech have truly inspired our all the faculty participants present over here and will be helpful in their future research also. I thank our Honorable MD Sir, Mr. Taranjit Singh, our Honorable Registrar Ma'am, Dr. Sheila Singh Ghosh, our Honorable Principal Sir, Dr. Partho Sarkar, Convener of the FDP, Dr. Shitanath Vishwas, Coordinator of the FDP, Shashwati Rokhit Ma'am, and the organizing committee members for their lots of efforts to make the second day of the FDP a successful one. Last of all, I would like to thank all the faculty participants for their passions who have made this second day of the FTP a successful and memorable one. So thank you all again and all the students volunteer also. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. I am very much thankful to Sitanath sir and madams for inviting me to giving the lecture.
Thank you so
Thank,
much,
thank,
sir, for joining us
thank you,
today. Thank you so much.
thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Sir. So we'll wind up for today and we'll see you tomorrow at the same time at 3 p.m. Thank you all.